All right, joining us then in the studio is Miyelani Holeni, who's a senior partner at Chief Revenue Officer at Intiniso Consulting, to give us some more analysis and insight on the Auditor General's latest revelations about the South African municipalities and their financial health. Good morning to you, Mr. Holeni. Thank you very much for joining us again on Afro Breakfast. Well, as a start, I mean, the Auditor General has painted quite a bleak picture. Now, he says that he's reported that 75% increase in municipal irregular expenditure. Break this down for us.
Look, in organizational terms, we can say that, the municipalities, after their formation, they've been formed, they went through a long process of putting legislation in place. But officially, we can say that, the whole model is storming now. So it's a storm. So if we look at, the fact that, they're coming up, with various things such as, irregular expenditure. And irregular expenditure is a measure of the health of an organization. And it's also showing to the extent to which compliance or the legislation is taken or regulations are taken seriously. So in many cases, I mean, we can talk about irregular expenditure as something that may have been necessitated by an urgent event and so on. But it means that, municipalities or the officials within the administration need to always be prepared so that, they know when emergencies or planning towards emergencies and having contingencies so that they can follow the right processes. So in many respects, if you look at the large figure and it's culminating from previous years as well, it means that the whole system is showing up that, compliance is not being observed. And that is where I think the focus needs to be. And that speaks to governance. So if you look at the governance, side of things, a municipality on the one hand being a political organization, on the other hand being a commercial entity. So the mix, between the two, we need to manage, very, very tightly. On the other side, from the political side is the oversight, which must be enforced. And that oversight is one that must come from the various committees, such as, the MPEC, which is the equivalent of SCOPA, and all the other finance committees and the other committees that must preside over the municipality. So governance is a strong feature, and it's something that we believe needs to be honed in and almost drummed in so that it becomes something which is institutionalized. So when we talk about storming, we're saying we need to institutionalize a lot of the legislation and the regulations that are in place.
You talk about compliance, you talk about oversight, and this is one of the major issues that Mr. Kimi Makwetu pointed to yesterday in his report. He said that the municipalities are sort of ignoring recommendations that his office has made, and there were suggestions, and I suppose this is what will happen going forward, that the Auditor General will then have something to do about that, right? So what do you think about the fact that there more powers being given to the office of the Auditor General, and with those powers, in your view, what is the Auditor General supposed to do then?
Yeah, look, I think we must look at the Auditor General as an independent body that is supposed to be refereeing, if you want, the whole game within the municipal space. Right. So if we start adding powers to the Auditor General, whilst it's going to force and strengthen their hand so that they don't merely commentate or give comments, you're starting to have them as a player as well within the space. So I think we need to be very careful in terms of, the teeth or the additional powers that will be given to the AG as to what is it that it's going to do beyond what it currently can do. What about other organizations such as SALGA, which exist? What about the other committees or the other organizations that can play a role? Perhaps there needs to be a separate role that looks at, if you want, the enforcing of the legislation. There's National Treasury that does that. There's COCTA that does that. So we need to look at the other organizations that are involved within there. So I would be very careful in terms of, looking at, what powers do you confer upon the AG, whereas, on the other side, they are in a way, a supplier of services to municipalities. So we need to also.
So you'd want a sort of joint effort then in order to push through the recommendations. That we spoke to SALGA just before we had you in this chair, and they seemed quite happy to have the Auditor General having more power. So I mean, if they are all sort of in agreement, these organizations that you refer to, do you think then it would make sense that then the Auditor General does have sort of, I don't want to say singular power, but don't you think it would work in that sense?
Well, in this case, when we say we need to be careful, I think we need to strike that balance where the AG does a fantastic job of uncovering, in some cases, deficiencies within the system, make key recommendations. But we believe that you have the Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, which presides over municipalities. What would their role then be We also have the provincial side, which also has a role to play within municipalities. So it is not just the AG that we believe should be left, to this, but we understand that, there needs to be a strengthening of the governance. So within all the various bodies and the departments that are supposed to be working together, we need to see greater cooperation. We need to see, as the previous speaker also spoke about, the consequence management that is talking about. But we also need to look at the model of municipalities, because essentially municipalities are commercial entities. In as much as they are presided upon by the political leadership, they are commercial entities. So for us, for instance, at Diesel Consulting, we would want to look more in terms of how do you hone in and get the governance model to improve, and the funding side to improve as well, and to, in a way, allow the synergies between the political side as well as the administration. Because at times where you see some of the issues that are coming up, there either are tensions within the administration as well as the political side. Or if you go into the administration side, you find that the requisite skills that should be in place are not in place there. So you can give teeth to the AG, for instance, but does it solve the issue of the fact that there are lack of skills in some of the places? There are vacancies that must be filled. There's accountability that the municipal manager should be taking, and the fact that some of the municipalities being in the rural areas are starved of some of the funding that must get them to work, or they don't have strong revenue value chains that must be put in place. So for us is we need to descend into the whole machinery of the municipality and relook at the model and see how to tweak the various things. The municipalities should be also employers of choice. Are they employers of choice, for people who may want to leave the private sector or any other sectors to want to have the burning desire to join municipalities? So I think we spoke of professionalization of local government. I think we need to look deep into those aspects, because if local government does not attract the skills that are going to preside over the various tasks, and it's a complex machinery that must be presided upon by at least people who are qualified and will be able to take the proper decisions.
We throw a lot of terms out when we get when the Auditor General speaks. We use words like irregular expenditure. We also use words like a clean audits, and it's assumed that we know what all of that sort of means. So only 33 of the 257 municipalities received clean audits. When we say clean audits, what exactly are we saying?
I think basically, if you look at the various areas. So if you look at, for instance, on the leadership side, and the AG goes into depth, looking at the various aspects in terms of the performance of the organization. So the performance, for instance, will cover the revenues, will cover the fact that is the budget crafted properly? Does it cover all the aspects? The municipality has not extended itself. Is the leadership taking accountability of the various decisions, as well as taking consequences where required? So it's a basket of things that the AG would look at. So if you look financially with respect to a clean audit simply means that matters that must have gone through processes, whether it's a supply chain management policy, they've all gone through the policies. The committees that are supposed to preside over various decisions have done so. There is recording of those transactions. There is documentation to prove that those transactions are indeed valid and they were effected properly. In some of the cases with payments of suppliers, there's adherence to the norms of whether it's 14 days or 30 days where suppliers must be paid. So all of those aspects are looked upon. If you look within the revenue space as well, do we have all the consumers registered within the system? Are there deposits that are in place? Do you read the meters within every month and so on? So there are various things that would contribute from the various aspects if you look at how service delivery must be crafted. So that culminates in the reporting that says, and there's disclosure as well. Wherever perhaps there have been something that has gone wrong, there must be that disclosure, that voluntary disclosure that is put forward within the annual financial statement. So it speaks to how the system works and culminates into the financial numbers. If you imagine that if you buy electricity, you're spending money. If you purchase water, you're spending money, and so on. But you need to be able to account for each and every transaction that goes through the system, and it must be well documented, it must be captured within the system, and it must be justified in cases where, for instance, things go wrong. So that speaks to that accountability where the officials or the municipal manager and the chief financial officer can stand up and say, yes, we know everything that is going on within the organization, and this is what has gone right, this is what has gone wrong, and we are going to report, and if there's any cases of misconduct, those cases must be dealt with proactively as opposed to being discovered at the time of audit.
All right, in depth indeed and very insightful. We do appreciate your time very much, Mr. Holeni. That's Miyelani Holeni, who is the Senior Partner and Chief Revenue Officer at Integniso Consulting. They're giving us, his analysis and insight really on the Auditor General's latest revelations about the South African municipalities and their financial health, or not health actually, their sickness, I guess we should put it in that way. Well, all right.